Every secret your family buried, I found it all. His words were a confession, and Constance understood Leon was not working alone. There was inside help. If there was inside help, there would be evidence, and evidence meant this could be fought in courts. She picked up the pen again, positioning her hand so her fingers could form shapes beneath the table where Leon could not see. Help now. Close. In the hallway, Silas saw the sign through the glass panel. He stood, grabbed a metal tool tray, and dropped it. The clatter was enormous. Leon's head snapped toward the door. Silas knelt slowly, began gathering tools, muttering, "Apologies." The distraction lasted 5 seconds, but 5 seconds was enough. Audrey Finn and 2 police officers appeared at the hallway's end, moving silently. They positioned themselves on either side of the door. Audrey held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. She opened the door. Leon spun toward the sound, his hand emerging with the weapon visible. But before he could aim, Constance moved. She had been watching Silas through the glass, watching his hand signals. When Audrey opened the door, Silas signed one word. Down. Constance dropped beneath the table as Leon's attention split. Audrey and the officers rushed forward, weapons drawn, voices shouting. Leon grabbed for Constance, but caught air. He swung toward the officers. Then Silas stepped into the doorway and signed again. Constance could see him from beneath the table. The signs were for Matilda, the private language of father and daughter. You are safe. It is over. Come home. Leon turned again, trying to track too many threats, and his control shattered. He raised the weapon. Officers shouted. Then Ronnie George, monitoring every camera, cut the conference room lights remotely. In 3 seconds of darkness, officers wearing night vision moved with efficiency. When the lights came back, Leon was on the floor, weapons secured, hands restrained. He shouted about lawyers and lawsuits, but no one listened. Audrey was reading him his rights while Ronnie's camera footage played on her tablet, showing every moment from parking garage to conference room, a complete record of kidnapping and extortion. The arrest took 17 minutes. Leon was escorted out through the service entrance. Constance gave her statement in her office, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. When the detective asked how she signaled for help, she explained about sign language, about Silas, about reflections in marble floors. The detective promised to commend the maintenance worker, but commendations were not what Constance thought about. As she sat alone in her office an hour later, she was thinking about how close she had come to dying in a building she owned, surrounded by systems she had built. And she was thinking about how the person who saved her was someone she had never spoken to, whose name she learned only that afternoon, who had been invisible until she desperately needed him to see. Elias Corbin, the district attorney, arrived the next morning with preliminary findings. Leon Hale was not working alone. He had been funded by a shell corporation with organized crime ties, and he had inside help from someone in the Whitmore organization. That person provided access codes, security schedules, and confidential family financial records. The investigation was ongoing, but arrests were coming. Constance listened with calm that surprised her. She had spent her career building walls, creating systems and hierarchies that kept her separate from her employees. She had believed separation meant safety, that control meant security. Leon Hale had proven her wrong brutally. She thanked Elias for his work and promised full cooperation with the investigation. Then she asked him to leave. She had something else to do. Silas was cleaning the 3rd floor when Bridget found him. The CEO would like to see you in her office. Silas followed her to the executive level, walking on carpet so thick his footsteps made no sound. He had been here before, but only to empty trash after hours. Now in daylight, the space felt foreign. Constance stood when he entered. She gestured to a chair. Please sit. I need to speak with you. Silas sat carefully, aware his uniform was still damp from mopping. Constance sat across from him, looking at him as if trying to understand how a janitor had become the most important person in her building. I need to thank you, she said, and apologize. You saved my life, and I never even knew your name. You worked here 3 years, and I never once acknowledged your existence. That is unacceptable. Silas had not saved her for recognition. He had saved her because it was right, because he could not live with doing nothing, because his daughter was waiting for him to come home. Constance continued, "The police tell me you learned sign language for your daughter, that she is deaf. Is that correct?" "Yes," Silas said quietly. "Yesterday when I signed to you, you understood immediately. You did not hesitate. You needed help." Silas said there was not time for hesitation. Constance nodded slowly. "I had been thinking about what happened, about what it means. Yesterday, I learned that power is an illusion. The person with the most control was not the CEO or the man with the weapon. It was the janitor who nobody noticed, who saw what others missed, who acted when action mattered." She walked to the window. "I am going to make changes to this organization. Better security, better support for frontline employees, but more than that, I want to create a fund to support families with children who have disabilities, scholarships, therapy, equipment. I would like to name it in honor of your daughter." Silas felt something crack open in his chest. "You do not need to do that." "I know," Constance said. "I want to. Because you learned her language, you were able to help someone who desperately needed it. That deserves to be honored." She returned to her desk. "I also want to offer you a different position, Director of Employee Safety and Wellness. You would oversee programs to ensure every worker has the resources and support they need. The salary is substantially higher and the schedule is flexible for your daughter." Silas stared. "I am a janitor. I do not have a college degree. You have something better." Constance said, "The ability to see invisible people. The courage to act when others freeze. The lived experience of being overlooked. This organization needs someone who understands what that feels like, because that is how we build systems that actually protect people." Silas thought about Matilda, about medical bills, about the cramped apartment, about the future he wanted for his daughter. He thought about real change requiring people who understood what needed changing. Not from textbooks, but from living it. "I accept," he said. 3 months later, on a cold afternoon in early spring, Constance stood in the lobby of the Whitmore Grand as a new plaque was unveiled near the main entrance. The plaque listed emergency protocols, including a silent alert system allowing any employee to signal danger without speaking. The system had been designed by Silas, implemented by Audrey, and funded by the Matilda Henry Foundation for Children with Disabilities. Matilda was there holding her father's hand, watching with curious eyes as people gathered. She did not fully understand what was happening, but she understood her father was being honored, and that made her smile with fierce pride. Constance approached them and signed carefully, "Your father is a hero." Matilda's eyes widened. She looked at Silas, who nodded. Then Matilda signed back. "I know he is my dad." Later, after the ceremony ended, Constance found herself alone with Silas near the concierge desk where everything had begun. The marble floor still gleamed, still reflected everything. But now, when Constance looked down, she saw not just her reflection, but Silas standing beside her. "Equal and necessary." "I never thanked you properly," she said. Silas shook his head. "You thanked me with action. The fund, the job, the safety protocols, those things will help people long after I am gone." "Still," Constance said, and then she signed instead of speaking. "Thank you. You saved my life. You changed everything." Silas signed back. "You gave me a chance to matter." That gift goes both ways. Matilda ran across the lobby and grabbed her father's hand, pulling him toward the exit. Silas waved to Constance and let himself be led away. His daughter's laughter, a sound he could not hear, but could feel in her bouncing steps. Constance watched them go, and for the first time in years, she felt hope. Not calculated hope of quarterly earnings, but raw hope that came from knowing you had been wrong about everything and choosing to be right going forward. She returned to her office and sat at her desk looking over the city. Somewhere in that city, Leon Hale sat in a jail cell awaiting trial. Somewhere, his accomplice, a senior vice president who had sold out the company, had been arrested. And somewhere a 7-year-old girl who could not hear was teaching her father new signs, new ways of seeing the world. Constance picked up her phone and called the foundation office. "I want to expand our reach. Not just children with disabilities. Every family that struggles, every parent working 2 jobs, every person who feels invisible. I want them to know they matter. Find me the programs that do that work." The director promised to compile a list. Constance ended the call and walked to the window, watching the sun set over buildings where millions lived invisible lives. For so long she had believed success meant rising above them. Now she understood it meant reaching down, pulling others up, building systems that recognized everyone's humanity. She thought about Silas mopping floors in a building she owned, seeing danger in a reflection. She thought about Matilda, laughing with her whole heart. She thought about the contract she had nearly signed. The empire nearly lost. The life saved by a janitor who refused to look away. The city darkened as night fell. Lights coming on in windows across the skyline. Constance pressed her hand against the glass and made a promise. She would not forget. She would not return to the comfortable distance that separated CEOs from the people who cleaned their offices. She would not let the fear fade and the lessons disappear. She had been given a second chance, pulled back from darkness by hands that signed instead of shouted. By courage that required no audience. By a father's love teaching him to see what others missed. That chance came with responsibility, to honor it, to learn from it, to become the kind of leader who understood that real power was not control over others, but creating conditions where everyone could thrive. Constance turned from the window and sat at her computer. She had work to do, systems to build, policies to write, futures to shape. But for the first time in her career, the work felt less like conquest and more like service, less like climbing and more like building, less like proving worth and more like recognizing everyone else's. In the lobby far below, the night shift janitor began his rounds. He walked the same hallways Silas had walked, pushed the same cart, mopped the same floors. But now when he worked knowing his labor was seen. His presence acknowledged, his humanity recognized. The marble gleamed beneath his mop, reflecting his image back to him, and he smiled at what he saw. A person who mattered, a worker with dignity, a human being whose value was not measured by title or paycheck, but by the simple truth that he showed up, did his job, and deserved respect for both. That was the legacy of a terrifying afternoon when a CEO signed for help, and a janitor refused to look away. Not just a life saved, but a system changed. Not just a criminal caught, but a foundation built. Not just gratitude expressed, but dignity restored. The hotel lights blazed against the darkness, a beacon of warmth in the cold night. Inside, people worked and rested, lived their invisible lives with quiet knowledge that today someone was watching, someone cared, someone understood that every person deserved to be seen. And in a small apartment across the city, Silas Henry sat on the floor with his daughter, teaching her new signs and learning from her the ancient language of love that required no sound. They signed about their day, about the ceremony, about the future. And when Matilda finally drifted to sleep, her hands still moving in dream conversations, Silas covered her with a blanket and sat watching her breathe. He had saved a life. But more than that, he had proven something he had always believed. That kindness was not weakness, that attention to the overlooked was not wasted energy, that learning someone else's language was not a burden but a gift. The city slept around them, millions of hearts beating in the darkness, each carrying its own invisible stories. And in a hotel lobby across town, a plaque on the wall reminded everyone who entered that silence could be a cry for help and attention could save a life. And the people you do not notice might be the ones who notice everything. That was the lesson. That was the gift. That was the story that would be told for years in boardrooms and break rooms, in sign language and spoken words, in quiet moments when people chose to see instead of overlook. To act instead of ignore, to become the kind of human beings who made the world safer simply by refusing to look away. The Whitmore Grand Hotel stood tall against the night sky, its windows glowing with life, its future unfolding one careful, conscious decision at a time. And somewhere in that building, a marble floor reflected everything, holding the memory of the day when reflection became revelation. When a signal became salvation, when invisible became essential. The story ended there, but the legacy continued. In scholarships funded and lives changed, in protocols written and dignity restored, in a 7-year-old girl growing up knowing her father was a hero. In a CEO learning that power meant nothing without humanity.